Krishna, good morning. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna. So today, I'll share my screen. This will be a short class. I won't have too much to add on to these verses, but these are I'll be covering today verses 13 and 14 from Canto 3, Chapter 8. So I have here the verses, and I'll be sharing Vishwanath Chakravarti talk about commentary because Prabhupada doesn't have commentary on these particular verses. But we'll just read the verses, and then if anybody has anything that they would like to add, that would be more than welcome. So starting with text number 13. Tasyartha sukshma binivishta drishter antargato rito rajasataniyan gunena kala anugatena vidya susyam stada vidyata navideshat. Word for word. Tasya, his. Artha, subject. Sukshma, subtle. Abhinivishta drishte, of one whose attention was fixed. Antagata, internal. Artha, purpose. Rajasa, by the mode of passion of material nature. Taniyan, very subtle. Gunena, by the qualities. Kala anugatena, in due course of time. Vida, agitated. Sushyan, generating. Tada, then. Abidyata, pierced through. Navideshat, from the abdomen. So translation. The subtle subject matter of creation on which the Lord's attention was fixed was agitated by the material mode of passion. And thus the subtle form of creation pierced through his abdomen. And then I'll read text 14, and then I'll read Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's. I'll read the text 14, and then I'll read both of the commentaries back to back because they help to give some more kind of structure. So text 14. Sapadmakosha sahasodatishtat kalena karma pratibodadena swarochisa tat salilam vishalam vidyotayan arka ivat mayoni. Word for word. Sa, that. Padma kosha, bud of a lotus flower. Sahasa, suddenly. Udatishtat, appeared. Kalena, by time. Karma, fruit of activities. Pratibodhanena, awakening. Swarochisa, by its own effulgence. Tat, that. Shalilam, water of devastation. Vishalam, vast. Vidyotayan, illuminating. Arka, the sun. Iva, like. Atma Yoni, generating from the personality of Vishnu. Translation. Piercing through this sum total form of the fruit of activity. Piercing through this sum total form of the fruit of activity of the living entities took the shape of the bud of a lotus flower generated from the personality of Vishnu. And by his supreme will, it illuminated everything like the sun and dried up the vast waters of devastation. So now I'm going to read just Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary again. Prabhupada doesn't have commentary on these particular verses, but his commentary to verse number 13 is kind of a continuation of his thoughts from verse 12. So I'm going to just read his verse 12 commentary and then continue into 13 and 14. So he says, how long did the Lord remain resting? Though he is in waking state with his awakened Chit Shakti, he is sleeping with his sleeping Maya Shakti. By his time energy, he then became active in regards to the jivas within him, for giving them enjoyment. He looked at the living entities from Brahma to the non-moving beings, Lokan, who had attained subtle forms within his body in order to eject them from his body. So we're hearing a description of the Lord, beginning the process of expelling the jivas that have been dormant in his body. So the Lord is now, quote unquote, waking after having been resting. So then in text 13, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, this verse elaborates, after his glance entered into the subtle bodies of all the jivas, Artha Shukshma, to pull them out, the material elements within him, Antargata Artha, with very subtle form, Taniyan, became agitated by rajas according to time, and were brought forth, pushed them upwards from his navel. So then the Lord, after having been resting, he glances into this, collection of the jivas that have been resting, and they become agitated by the mode of passion, according to this description that Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is giving. And then in text 14, he says, the material element transforming into a lotus bud by time stood above the waters of devastation by the force of the awakened karmas of the jivas. The lotus bud had Vishnu, Atma, as its source. It was like the sun illuminating by its effulgence. It did not depend on the sun to light up the water. I'm going to read that again. This material element, or the material element, transforming into a lotus bud by time, stood above the waters of devastation by the force of the awakened karmas of the jivas. The lotus bud had Vishnu as its source. It was like the sun illuminating by its effulgence. It did not depend on the sun to light up the water. So it seems like, in Prabhupada's translation, he also says, piercing through the sum total form of the fruit of activity of the living entities took shape. So I'm reading this very slowly and kind of with purpose, because personally, these descriptions of creation are always very hard to follow. And especially this, this one, for example, is it's a very it's a physical description of a subtle element coming into a physical form. My understanding of what I'm reading here is that this kind of collection of the mode of passion, which is like the sum total of all of the fruit of activity of the living entities, it's becoming a physical form of this lotus flower generating from the navel of the Lord. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and Prabhupada are both, helping to describe this through their translations. So, and then I guess just backing up a little bit, this section we're just hearing about Maitreya describing how he had heard the Bhagavatam from a lineage of teachers, and now he's explaining this creation process to Vidura. So this is again Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur just explaining a little bit more about how these subtle elements, in this instance the mode of passion, is becoming this lotus flower that is extending from the navel of the Lord. And I don't have much else to add to this, honestly. This creation process, very, very, I've heard the creation process 1,000 times and I still barely understand it. But, I figured that I could at least share Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's own words. And if anybody has something that they can add to this or, extract from this more, I would be very grateful to hear. But I'm sure that somebody could, if they, I'm sure somebody could do a better job than me expressing this section, but I hope that's okay. Does anybody have anything that they could add to this? If not, that's okay as well.
Hare Krishna, Mukunda.
Yes, Prabhu, Hare Krishna.
I was when you said like the whole creation is such a complex thing. I was the moment you actually started this verse, I was kind of, my mind exactly went there, like this whole section, like which kind of repeats multiple times in Srimad Bhagavatam. We had like the same kind of section just when Uddhava was explaining to Vidura, so kind of similar thing happened, and then Maitreya is kind of doing that. One thing which kind of came to my mind was most of the complex things, even not just in the spiritual world, but even in just the material cosmic level, some of the very complex things that people kind of made efforts to understand was they kind of had that faith that this actually makes sense. It's just I'm not there yet. I have to put in some efforts, gain whatever, like kind of study it or meet people who actually have that understanding in much deeper level, and then I'll reach there. So somebody who starts with questioning the truth of the topic kind of can never reach to that point of conclusion where they actually can really believe it. So I think I was just meditating on that point, that I'm not at that point, but there are like multiple, it's not just one personality who explained about the creation, just thinking that, so it's not for the devotees who were part of the Bhagavatam, but it was for yogis or something. Like it's not like that. In multiple instances, it keeps coming. So I have to kind of make efforts to grow in my overall understanding, where I come to that point of having that faith. As Srila Prabhupada again explains in Bhagavad Gita, like faith means having implicit in something sublime. Like I can't exactly. Yeah, he says
like put it into words.
Unflinching trust in something sublime. Srila Prabhupada translates faith as unflinching trust in something sublime, and this is entirely sublime for most of us.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, a kind of test of our faith. Do we have that kind of unflinching trust that this is how the creation happened, and then as we kind of keep at it, as Amritikali Mataji was explaining last time, kind of be alive in the Krishna consciousness. Once we are alive, then someday we will be like, yeah, oh, that's how it happened.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Prabhu. I mean, I was just having a thought as you were sharing that, because you're saying that, um, do we, do we have unflinching faith in, for example, like this is kind of a phantasmic phantasmagorical explanation of
Mm,
like this, the mode of passion becomes a lotus flower, and it's made up of all of these jivas that are, and this lotus is extending from the navel of the Lord, and it's obviously it's like a very impossible to picture kind of scene. And so part of me is, I like this point that you're bringing up, that part of the part of the challenge is, uh, to continue to work so that we can understand this, and by understanding this, strengthen our faith. But then the other question that comes up in my head, and this is like a question to the group, if anybody has an answer, please feel free to share. But the reflection that I always have when I read sections like this, I have to continuously remind myself, how is this relevant? Like, how does this aid my highest goal? If my highest goal is to achieve love of Krishna in Vrindavan, then how does this relate to that? And I think that can be challenging also. Like, even if I don't have difficulty accepting this, even if I can say, okay, yeah, that's fine. The navel, this lotus extends from the navel of Lord Vishnu. I believe it. And if even if I can truly say that I do believe that wholeheartedly, the next part of the question to answer is, how does this relate to my highest ideal of achieving love for Krishna and Vrindavan? And I'm curious to hear if anybody has any thoughts they can share on that.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu.
So for me, it was coming, Prabhu. I mean, of course, I mean, the Lord is in the whole Bhagavatam, right? All the prayers of the many devotees are in the whole section of Bhagavatam, right? I mean, before we go to 10th canto, it all talks about how great the Lord is, right? At creation, and He can do such a unimaginable things, right? So I mean, He is such a powerful personality, and then he has such a sweet relationships, right? So when I go to that stage of love of Godhead, right, by knowing that he is such a great personality, right, I mean it gives, I mean, some, I mean, impetus for us to see. It's not that, okay, if somebody is very great, I mean, it's very difficult to approach them, right? I mean, like, for example, it's not easy to approach and put a hand on their shoulder and all, right? But the Lord is, I mean, such a sweet personality. I mean, he has one-on-one relationship with each and every one of us, but he's at the same time great, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, I hear Rumpad Maharaj saying that I don't need to know all the details to go back to Godhead, right? But by knowing it,
Yeah.
it gives an understanding that how great he is, right? I mean, it helps maybe our faith, and it helps our appreciation to the Supreme Lord, to see, even though he's such a great personality, still, I mean, he loves each and every one of us, right? So I was
Mm.
just, that thoughts are coming to me, Prabhu. I mean, when you mentioned that, so
Yeah.
because it's not that if somebody doesn't know how great Lord is, I'm just saying that he's not in the love of God at stage, but he doesn't know how great he is. Like, for example, if Lord comes to me, right, if without knowing what he is and all, I will not be able to appreciate him. Yeah, he's thinking like he's
Mm.
like another person, right? He might be doing some magics, right, like Duryodhana thing, right? So I mean, Duryodhana knows Krishna is there in front of him, but he thinks that he's a big magician, right? I mean, yeah, he can
Yeah.
show this, he can do that and all, but he doesn't know that he's the Supreme Lord,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's such a sweet relationship with Pandavas, and then he is doing some great things in front of Duryodhana. In front of Duryodhana,
Yeah.
he was doing great things, but he was thinking that he's maybe a big magician, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah, one gets this whole understanding. I mean, especially for people like us, right? I mean, it gives a lot of helpful. I mean, maybe some people are very simple; they don't need to know, so they might be able to accept it. But people like us, I mean, yeah, I mean, the Lord is so great, but how great He is, we are trying to understand so in detail. So then that helps us to the next stage. So even though he's such a great personality, I mean, he has such a sweet relationship with each of us. He likes us.
Yeah.
Or, that's what I was thinking.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Prabhu.
Like in support of what Lakshmikant Prabhu just shared, like in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, in the first chapter of Adi Leela, when Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami is kind of in the beginning, I'm currently reading that section, so it just I was able to connect. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami kind of explains some verses from like the Chatushloki, and in one of the verses, Srila Prabhupada writes here that I'm reading from middle of the purport. The entire material manifestation develops and exists because the Supreme Personality of Godhead enters it as Paramatma or the Super Soul. The personality of Godhead in his all-pervading feature of Paramatma enters every entity from the biggest to most minute. His existence can be realized by one who has a single qualification of submissiveness and who thereby becomes a surrendered soul. The development of submissiveness is the cause of proportionate spiritual realization, by which one can ultimately meet the Supreme Lord in person, as a man meets another man face to face. Because of his development of transcendental attachment for the Supreme Lord, a surrendered soul feels the presence of his beloved everywhere, and all his senses are engaged in the loving service of the Lord. And then he says, finally he says, thus the Lord is manifested to a pure devotee from within and without. This is one of the mysteries of devotional relationship. To achieve this love should be the goal of life for every living being. Kind of Prabhupada starts from the creation, how Paramatma comes, and then kind of it in a way it's directly answering to your question that how does it help me to attain that love of Godhead in his personal feature is Prabhupada, as is explained that I kind of expanding on what Lakshmikant Prabhu also said is kind of you understand the entire he is present everywhere, and in doing so you kind of submit to him, create that develop that submissiveness, and then feel his presence across everywhere. It's not that he is only present as Radha Shyam Sundar and ISKCON Nepal, but he's present across this creation, and through that you kind of connect that to the personal feature of the Lord, and that helps you achieve the love of Godhead. So it's
that is a very nice. Thank you, Prabhu. That's very relevant section. Yeah, so understanding that the kind of like the Aishwarya or the greatness aspect of the Lord allows us to feel like it's natural to surrender to this greatness everywhere. Yeah, nice. Thank you.
It's like you should understand the greatness of the Lord to eventually forget the greatness of the Lord to have that love.
yeah, I mean that's what it is, I guess. Yeah.
But thank you for bringing up this discussion.
Thank you, Prabhu. I think this is the only thing we can say with in a section like this. I don't know what else to say. So but yeah, anybody else have any thoughts or comments? Thank you both for sharing these thoughts.
Hare Krishna, Mukunda.
Hare Krishna.
Just little bit that I help myself understand and believe is on a very simple platform, like for us, if I want to have a relationship with a guy, like I'm looking for someone to marry, right? So if I see the person, I have no attraction. Okay, maybe he's good looking, but what else, right? I may not know of him. I would want to know of him. And then, okay, this is his education, this is his likes, this is his dislikes. We go more into finding out the qualities they possess, or, what is it that I would like about him. So the more we know about the person, and the more we like, maybe there is few qualities out of the few qualities that really attract, and that's what creates the bonding, like, oh, this is the quality that I would really like in my life partner to have, and that's what's going to attract me. So that's how I look at I look at and it could be a child, it could be, a spouse, it could be a family member, whatever. But the more we know about them, the more we attract towards them, the more we develop love and respect for them. And that's how I look. Okay, I'm listening to all this. That's exactly how I feel. Like, it's hard for me to grasp what you just, what we discussed today too. But if I look upon, okay, that's what I'm looking for to develop the love, then that's what it is. We never know that what will attract us. And each of us have different personalities. So I may be attracted to Kirtan, you may be attracted to Kirtan, I may be attracted to Prashadam, I may be attracted to anything, that any Leela that Krishna has, and that might create my bonding with him. So be it. That's going to help me develop my relation. That's how I try to understand. So the more complicated, Leelas, I kind of not stress on myself. Like, I know he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He can do anything and everything. But this is what attracts me, and this is what I would like to develop my relation with him, kind of thing. I don't know if that helps, but that's how I try to explain myself.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. That's very nice. And that example is interesting because, if we're talking about, like a man trying to get into a relationship with a woman or vice versa, at first they hear some qualities about the other person that they like, and they become attracted, and then they live together, and then they start to learn too much about the other person, and then they start to not like them.
That's true.
And I think that aspect is also relevant here too. Obviously this is like, we're talking about a higher level of Krishna consciousness at this point, but basically you do get, ideally, hopefully we all get to a point in our Krishna consciousness where actually our taste becomes pretty refined, and there are things that we do want to hear about Krishna that are especially attractive to us, maybe particular pastimes or particular dealings with certain devotees. And maybe there are other aspects that are not as attractive. Maybe there are certain forms of the Lord that are not as attractive as others to us anymore, even though at an earlier point in our Krishna consciousness, maybe there had been a time where we were equally enthusiastic to hear about the pastimes of the Lord, regardless of what form he took, what devotee he was associating with. But I think I don't think our Shastra says that ideally our taste will become very refined and very particular. So I think this is a nice, actually harmonious point to bring everything together, because what Lakshmikanta Prabhu and Haridwani Prabhu were sharing, hearing about this kind of Aishwarya feature of the Lord allows us to surrender to this great power. And then also, harmonizing with your point, then we start to hear, we might start to hear about particular qualities that are specifically attractive. And then that can kind of steer our, focus and attraction in a very particular way. So, but yeah, thank you for sharing this. Anyway, thank you all for sharing these points. This is all very helpful. Making a section that can otherwise be very difficult more nourishing. Yes, so thank you all for joining, and I have nothing else to share, so Hare Krishna.
Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you.